Okay, Los Angeles Chargers draft review, draft recap. When I did my, I made a video where I picked my top, my favorite teams in free agency, and I thought the Chargers did actually the best job in free agency. I had them as number one. I thought they maximized their value of what money they had to spend really well, and so entering the draft, let's see how they continue this offseason, starting off with the first round pick. Before we get into it, just so you know what the chart is that you see next to me, this is the number all the way to the left is where the player was selected, then the player name, their position, and finally where they were projected to go via the consensus big board. Omarion Hampton, the kind of surprise. It's a move that does make sense, but I just didn't think about it until it happened. I think a lot of people thought Denver was going to take Hampton a couple picks earlier. Is not what happened. Ultimately, when they signed Najee Harris, I kind of thought that was just going to be it. I think Najee Harris is an underrated running back, and he's someone who can kind of do all three things. But ultimately, you do want two running backs who are effective. And I think for Hampton, part of what people liked about him is he's a guy who can be a bell cow back and take a ton of snaps as well. And now you kind of have two of those guys. But that's not the worst thing in the world to have guys who, okay, if there is an injury, they can take a higher workload, but also can still, you can keep them fresh and they can be physical guys who can withstand the course of a game, but now don't have to. I don't know. It's interesting. But again, there's the running back value discussion. Is it worth a first round pick? We all have our opinions already made up about that, so I won't really get into it. But yeah, if you feel like he is worth a first round pick, getting someone who can help out the running game and how much they value the running game, it totally makes sense. Trey Harris was projected to go 63rd. They get him at 55th. A guy who comes from the Ole Miss scheme. He's 6'3", so has good size, and he runs a 4.54, which for a 6'3" guy, you'll take that. It's not electric for a top pick, but that's pretty good. He's not going to wow you with his versatility, his different types of routes that he runs, because he isn't overly quick. And also Ole Miss just runs a weird offense, so he's just kind of a project in that sense. But there are some real positive traits, and again, they need to improve the receiving room, so they go out and get another guy who should at least be an effective player and can kind of do some things that Ladd McConkey can't, and then McConkey can do the things that he can't, and they complement each other nicely there. So it makes sense to add another receiver. This is a pick that, an expression I used to say all the time. I haven't been saying it that much this year, but never let a day two go by without drafting at least one receiver or a safety. They check that box there, just because those positions in the second round on the second day tend to still be pretty good. They then go after Jamari Caldwell, interior defensive lineman, projected to go later, but I still like this pick a lot. I think he is a player who, again, is he going to be a every down player? No. This is a 340-pound run-stuffing interior defensive lineman who you can't have out there on every snap. I don't think he should be out there on very many third downs, if any third downs. But you know what? You need players like this, and you need to make sure they can be all right. And it feels like teams will overdraft these types all the time. Getting a guy who has good production, has good physical traits, I think it's a smart move. So I'm on board. They then go out with pick 125 and get a guy who is projected to go around in the 80s. So it's kind of funny. In the 80s, they get a guy projected to go 111, and then in 125, they get a guy projected to go in the 80s. Kyle Kennard, who should just be a good, I think, pass rushing edge rusher. Again, not a guy I don't think you're going to put out there for every single snap. But you know what? Sometimes you can just do this, right? Yes, it's great if you had 4 defensive linemen who all were 1,000-snap guys and you just keep them out there. But teams don't really have that. You can't put that much resources into it. So a great way to make sure you're still having good pass rush and things like that is guys like Kyle Kennard. So makes sense there. Then they decide to go out and get Keandre Lambert-Smith, another guy who was projected to go later. So again, you're talking significantly later. You're talking about 60 snaps later at this point. But he is someone who projects as a downfield threat, but usually has not been in an offense who they value that, and that's kind of his whole thing here. Pretty much, he's someone who can be successful down the field. I don't know if you're expecting too much else other than that. This also means could be a good special teams guy, which is why he was projected to go a little later for the special teams. But if they feel like they can get more out of him on offense, well, that's a reason to potentially draft him earlier. They then drafted Orlando Gadsden the second, tight end who is a weird body type for a tight end, 6'5", 236. So kind of like almost a hybrid. It's a bit of a tweener here in between what you want for a tight end, smaller for a tight end, but he'd be huge for a receiver. So what do you go with here? Is someone who I think you look at and is really he's more of a I think more of a receiving tight end, and maybe he's just going to transition to a receiver. We'll see. Still a tight end as of right now, so we're going to see how that works. Does have some really interesting, interesting numbers, interesting production. A 1.89 yards per route ran, which is good for a tight end, very good for a tight end. So you like all that stuff. You just wonder, does he have the explosiveness to fully work at the next level, which is why he fell a little bit. But still, at this point, I think it's totally fine to take a chance on him. Should be a good depth player, if nothing else. They then, with pick 199, I believe that was when Tom Brady was selected. Maybe Branson Taylor is the next Tom Brady. Probably not. But a guy who is projected to go, 315th, which is past where there are picks. But that's where he ranked on the consensus big board. A bit of an interesting prospect here who is 23 years old, despite having, officially 5 years where he's had snaps in college, although only 3 of those were significant snaps. And even those, he was, last year, he was a starter, but ultimately season gets cut short. So that's, I think there's a projection here. Is a guy who is 6'6", 330, but because of maybe some injuries, he hasn't really fully been able to develop as a player. So I think maybe the idea here is with a depth pick, let's get a guy who hopefully he can stay healthy and he can be someone who can be a consistent player. We will see if we can develop him. I think that's probably the logic here. So then we have R.J. Mickens, who as a safety here, is someone who, again, the production was very good. Now, he is not someone you really want playing run defense here, so I'm assuming more of a free safety type, but I wouldn't be shocked at all, actually, even though he was picked with pick 214, if he's someone who finds a way into some games this year as a defender. Again, sometimes in the 200s, you're like, oh, this is the guy who is a special teams player. I don't know if that's how they view RJ Mickens. I think they might view him as just a player who can be a depth piece, and hey, you might have to play some special teams just to fill out the roster, but I think they're viewing him more as an actual player. And finally, with pick 256, this is the real Mr. Irrelevant, right? Because the last player picked gets to be the whole, oh, this player is Mr. Irrelevant. But the guy before the last pick, Trequezie Bridges, is really the Mr. Irrelevant here. Was projected to go 666. That's not a great sign, if that's where your projection was. But ultimately, again, is just a special teams guy. At these picks, essentially the logic here is, well, you already have a contract worked out, and hey, no one else can sign him. You don't have to negotiate or anything like that. So, again, sometimes here you almost wonder, like, is it better off just not getting drafted and being an undrafted free agent and getting to go somewhere that works for you? But hey, at least you got drafted. You can say that, something you'll be able to save for forever. So I guess there's that benefit. Wasn't okay. Safety at Florida. Is someone who I think is probably just going to be a special teams guy here at pick 256, and that's fine. You need those players. So ultimately, as a whole, some curious picks. Some picks I really liked, though. Kind of a bit of a hot and cold draft right here, but ultimately some players that should help them and continue this rebuild as they continue to get better and better. They were way ahead of schedule last year. Let's see if they can continue to be way ahead of schedule this next year, but a couple picks that should really help them. So yeah, those are my thoughts on all of this. What are yours? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from ya, and of course, as always, thanks for watching.